Hey Sam, it's Brett with the Tuning School. I was going to shoot you a quick video this morning talking about the virtual VE and kind of trying to explain it. I know you were kind of struggling with it the other day. So when you go through your virtual VE settings, let me give you some background information before we get too far. So I'm going to try to do this as quick as I can. So if you need to come back and rewatch this a couple of times, that's perfectly fine. So when you're in the tune file, this actually is an '08 VET manual, which, if I'm not mistaken, is actually very similar to what you have there that you were working on. So under airflow, there's a speed density section, and there's a bunch of VE coefficients here. Now, these coefficients is what we describe as nonlinear coefficients. They're not linear in fashion as far as increasing and decreasing. They really don't make a lot of sense. They're not defined well by HP tuners. I wouldn't even know where to begin to start to change these. And so what HP tuners did is they gave us the virtual volumetric efficiency calculator that you see here. So that is this guy right here. And this is where you can actually start making some changes. Again, it's non-linear, so you notice when you look at this, it's kind of got some weird bumps in it here, things like that. So that's perfectly normal. There's nothing to really worry about there. So what the book has you do is it has you go, you scan your vehicle, you build your graph. This is a part throttle scan of it's actually our '06 VET, but it's got a 2010 computer in it. So you scan it. This is all just part throttle driving for what I was doing with the car at the moment. So when you go look at your graph, this is where your graph's off, right? So you created your graph. What you would do is you'd copy your graph and you go over to the editor and you'd highlight it, you'd select paste special by %, and it changes the areas that it's supposed to. Now what you need to do at this point is click calculate coefficients. And what that has done is it's kind of stitched the data together in the way that it wants to see it. So now that you've done that, if you close this, you notice to change all these VE coefficients in the background. Again, I didn't know to change constant, and I didn't know to change these two cells and these two cells and so on. So that's what the calculator is really there for. Now, here's the problem that we run into, and this is not necessarily something that's covered in the material, because it's something new that we've been learning within this last year. This calculator that they have, when it does that thing where it stitches the zones together, it doesn't do a very good job with that. So when you look at this, you can go show zone numbers. This table is broken down into 29 zones, right? So you got your 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up. So you can see each zone is a set of numbers. When you're clicking calculate coefficients, it's because it's stitching the data between two zones together, okay? Now, what I found is the HP Tuners calculator does not do a very good job of this. And so I've developed a little bit of a different approach that I think would help. So when I say they don't do a good job, because it changes the data, it seems like you can never get the fuel trims quite right, which is what the problem is you were having, is your fuel trims are never really getting fixed, because every time you click calculate the data, it'll curve the data one way or the other. Normally, the way it was explained to me by the HP Tuners engineer, it draws a curve this way, or it draws a curve this way. So it's going to go either curve from the bottom over to the bottom again, or from the top down and then up again. It's really the way it's designed. So, and it's just not very good. So what I do is I like to identify a zone. So, for example, if we're looking at this data here, I go, okay, we have some fuel trim error and around 1200. There's a pretty bad cell there, but I go, it's roughly this area, right? So I figure out what zone that is. So I go back over here and say, all right, well, my scan was roughly 800 to 1600 RPM, and if we're looking in that range, it's like 35 to 60 kPa. So if you go back and look at your editor, so it's 800 to 1600, so that's here, and then it's that 30 to 50. What do we say? We said it was so around 30 and all the way down here to actually 60. So when you look at that, you can say, okay, really we're spanning a couple of zones here. There's a little bit of zone 1, there's a little bit of these zones, 7 and zones 8, zones 2. We're spending a little bit of time in each of those zones. So what I do is I go identify those exact zones. So zone 2 is 45 kPa to 57 kPa, and it's at first 3 RPM column. So 45 to 55, sorry, 65, let's see here, 45 to 57, my bad. So 45 to 57, which is this guy roughly right here. You notice my axis is actually a little bit off. I can actually fix that really quick. So my graph wasn't not quite set up right. This was all part of the normal book process where you would actually change the axes. So if we look at this here, I'm in my graph. I'm going to fix this RPM road here. We're going to go paste. There we go. So that's better now. So now I actually got the right data. So we're looking at this area, 57. And then what I do is I pick an average. So I look at this data and I say, okay, on average in this entire zone, and actually it's zone here is the one we were looking at originally. So on average in this zone, we're off by roughly about, I would say, a little more than 6%. So we're looking at like 8% or so. And so what I will do is I take the entire zone. So you see 45, 57, 400 to 800. Take my entire zone 2, which just got that error. So we got 10, 6, and 2. And I'm going to go roughly, it's an average of about 7 or 8. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight zone 2. When I select do not show zone numbers, I'm going to add 8% as an average for the entire zone. Click add. Now, what's interesting is if you watch very carefully, when I click calculate coefficients, you notice it changed nothing. It didn't change any of the data within the zone, and it doesn't change any of the zones around it. It does that because I'm not trying to stitch zones together anymore. I'm focusing on each zone individually. And so because of this, this works much better. And so what I would do next is I go to my next zone and say, okay, what does this zone look like? So same KPA range. So we're looking at 47 to 45 to 57. So right here, and our RPM is going to go 1,000 to 1,600. So if I go over here, it's 1,000 to 1,600. And they're going to go 45 to 57. So again, what's the average? So roughly, I would say the average here between these 9s, 6, and 15, I would say if I added about 10 to it, it's not going to hurt us, because if you think about it, it'll be 5% off here and negative 4% off here. So it would be okay. So if we added 10 to this zone, oops, my bad. So we go back to the editor, and we got, so we still have zone 8 highlighted. So what I would do is I'd go in here, 1.1, and click multiply. And then when I click calculate coefficients, it doesn't stitch any zones. It doesn't change any data. It's beautiful. It works really well. This method has worked really well on a few cars that I've tested out. Now, keep in mind, remember, you've got to do your manifold switched open. That's the main table that you're going to be using. I've been changing the wrong one this whole time. So you need to make sure you're doing your manifold switched open. And if you have a variable cam, the table will change with the cam angles. So you need to log the cam angles to make sure that that stuff's not happening. But basically, what you're at now is basically the way that I would suggest doing it. It's a little complicated. That's why I was mentioning on Friday, you really should just do math-only mode, because for the amount of effort that you're going to take to try to do the table in this way, it's really not worth the effort where you could just run the car in math-only mode. So hopefully this makes a little bit of sense about how to look at this in the zones, taking a zone and taking just the average error for that zone. You do it for each zone that you actually ended up with data in. So naturally our next zone would be this guy here, just above us. We would focus on here, then we come over here, we focus on our zones. So if you have any questions, just let me know, Sam, and I'll be glad to try to explain it further. And other than that, hope you have a good day and a good start to your week.